Hello, hello. Welcome to NJ Thrive's Small Business Webinars. You are attending our weekly webinars created to help New Jersey small business owners start, grow, and thrive. Today is Thursday, April 27th. It is 12:02 Eastern Time. Thank you all so much for attending. You're in for a jam-packed session of a webinar, so I'd like to get started as soon as possible. My name is Uzma Sheikh. I'm a coordinator at NJSBDC. And to tell you a little about NJSBDC, the acronym, what it stands for, it's the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers Network, and it's a statewide program powered by the SBA, stands for Small Business Administration, and partners like NJBAC, NJEDA to help small businesses in New Jersey with three things. So no cost small business consulting, training and events starting at $0, and exclusive small business resources. And the map that you see on the right over there, it shows where all our regional centers are. So if you're in one of those counties or if you're interested, go to our website, njsbdc.com, and you'll find our regional center there. If you can hear me properly, see me properly, please let me know in the chat by entering 1. And please feel free to let us know where you're from, who you are, if you have a small business, what your business is about, and share any contact information that you'd like. So our audience, you can network in between while I do this. All right, and moving on, what's our agenda? So we have a couple of headlines, things that are happening, have happened, or will happen in the small business community that we like our audience to stay up to date with. And then we'll go through our presentation. And then in the end, we'll have our Q&A session. So we do have, it looks like a lot of headlines, but I'll go through them quickly. I won't take up a lot of our presenters' time. And if you have any questions in the meantime, let us know, and we'll do our best to help you with any technical difficulties that come up. Okay, so some of the headlines, all the headlines that I go through, the links will be provided in the chat, and you can just open them from there or copy those links. All right, so on May 18th, on Thursday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., there will be an in-person training from Novus I-Core program at the Rutgers University. It's a networking lunch, a workshop from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The location's provided. It's on Eventbrite, so you can register and get your free tickets from there. And you can have a training. It's a 3-hour training introducing the I-Core Lean Launchpad, and then you can network with all the like-minded small business owners, preparation and follow-on opportunities. So good stuff. Definitely encourage you all to check out, especially if you're attending the webinar today. That means this is probably of interest to you. And then we have our National Small Business Week happening next week from April 30th to May 6th. I know we mentioned this a couple of times in our past webinars, but it's literally next week. So if you have not registered, please do so. And it has all the this is their official website. So on SBA.gov, National Small Business Week. So any of the awards, the virtual summit, all of that, sponsors, they have all the information. And if you're interested in what's happening, what their agenda is, then you can visit the agenda over here. And all the topics for their trainings or the workshops, all of it is mentioned here. Lots of good information and stuff. So definitely encourage everyone to register. It's free. Then we have NJEDA's events coming up for the Small Business Week, and all that information in English and in Spanish. Any of the sessions that will be happening are listed here. And this is for the Small Business Week. They also have information session happening on May 11th from 10:30 to 11:30. And this is the NJEDA Recovery Loan Loss Reserve Fund information session. All right, moving on to the next one. This is powered by STM Geeks, New Jersey Digital Marketing Conference. It's happening from Thursday, May 4th, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monmouth University's Pollock Theater. And it's I believe, one-day event. There you go. Yeah, one-day event. And it's to maximize your personal growth, engage and educate network. thoughtful discussions happening all day. So with the code, you can get a ticket for 140 for an entire day. All right, moving on to a press release from NJEDA. They're to issue expressions of interest form for indoor amusement park grant program. And it was released just recently on the 21st. On Friday, April 28th, which is tomorrow, NJEDA will issue an expressions of interest form for the New Jersey Indoor Amusement Park Grant Program. So definitely recommend checking this out if this applies to you. And last one, we have NJEDA to fund sub-arc welding training in Camden County. So they've announced 2 agreements to establish sub-arc welding programs at Camden County College and Camden County Technical Schools. Over $300,000 in funding will be distributed to the 2 schools to train workers for careers in a heavy steel offshore wind component manufacturing. All right, back to our slideshow. Things to keep in mind for this webinar that you are attending. All right, if you have questions, please let us know. Inform us with using the Q&A section that we have. You'll see 2. There is a chat box and there's a Q&A box. Please send your questions in the Q&A so we can address them in our Q&A session later on. If you send anything in the chat, it will most likely get lost. If you would like the slideshow that the presenter will have, then please complete a 3-minute survey. It won't even take you 3 minutes. You just have to do that to let us know, what kind of feedback you have for us for these webinars, what you'd like to see in future, things like that. And at the end, you'll get a link when you complete it, and that will take you to the slideshow. All right, so to get to our presenter, we have Cheryl Fitzroy today. Cheryl is one of our NJSBDC Tech Team consultant, and she will be presenting on discover your business model and ideal customer for tech commercialization. Cheryl, I will unshare. Thank you so much for doing this for us today. Please, there you go. I see you here. The spotlight is yours.
Thank you, Uzma. I'm thrilled to be here, and good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can now see my slide deck, as well as perhaps seeing me for the presentation. And today,
Cheryl, sorry to interrupt. I can see your video. That's perfectly fine. If you can just share your screen.
Okay.
I'll let you know when I see it on my end, and I'm sure that will let others see it too.
Okay, one moment. I thought I did press that, but let me go back.
No problem.
And
if it's not showing up, then our webinar assistant can pull it up too. It's not a problem.
Do that because I'm trying several things here and it doesn't seem to be able to share for whatever reason.
No problem. Gloria, if you would be so kind to share your screen.
Yeah.
And Cheryl, just let her know when to move this slides.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. Well, welcome again. And it's just a pleasure to be here this afternoon talking about one of my very favorite topics, which is commercializing innovation. Today, we're going to give an introduction to this topic, talk a little bit about the history and also why it's important, what it is, and so on and so forth. But there is another follow-up session coming after this one. It's yet to be scheduled. Where we actually dig into how do we do that? How do we do certain things affiliated with Lean Startup, for example? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I have a business background, but I am also appointed at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I consider myself a professor of practice. That means that I've been spending my life and my career in the applied realm, not solely in academia, and I have had many different experiences that I call upon in order to share my expertise with you. The first part of my career was spent in industry, where I was a general manager for a nationwide association. But at that time, I was still what's thought of as an intrapreneur. In other words, someone who's always thinking entrepreneurial, even inside another organization. I went on to become an entrepreneur myself, both running as the principal a small consulting practice, as well as being involved in several different early stage firms and running two of them as the CEO. I've also spent a great deal of time in academia and economic development, directing programs such as these, instructing students on how to commercialize innovation. And in doing that, I was lucky enough to have become a mentor in Lean Startup, which is one of the things we're going to discuss today, both locally in Madison, Wisconsin, and also across the nation in the NSF I-Corps, which Uzma mentioned in the introduction. Lastly, I'll just mention that I have also invested in several early stage technologies, both as an individual investor and also as a part of a $10 million fund. So those varied perspectives give me quite a lot of different points of view that I like to share with folks like yourself in terms of starting and growing your small business. Next slide. So today's agenda will be about commercializing your innovation. I like to start with a brief review because this is a part of a series of webinars. So we'll take a step back for those who are joining this program today and did not participate earlier. I want to talk briefly about what is SBIR, STTR, and the various phases. And then today we're bringing in this whole topic of that steps aside from the technical aspects, dives into the business aspect of creating and commercializing innovation. So we talk about what is commercialization, why does it matter? We'll talk a little bit about what is a business model and what is customer discovery. And then we'll loop back or circle back to what exactly do we need to do for SBIR STTR in a phase 1 application and a phase 2 application. Next slide, please. So what is SBIR STTR? This is a build slide, so you can run through the whole thing if you would, as I speak. So this program is first and foremost about small business. It has the word small business in the name, SB, Small Business Innovation Research. And by the SBA standards, a small business applicant is less than or equal to 500 employees. However, this program specifically, unlike some of the other small business programs, is also about technology. It's about innovative technology, which has both novelty and also high risk associated with it. In other words, it's difficult to commercialize without the assistance of government support, and there is IP potential in terms of the innovation. This program is about research. In phase 1, a person must take on the goal of proving feasibility, and then which may also mean validating efficacy, safety. This depends on what your technology is about, but it's about conducting research very specifically in phase 1 and even in phase 2. Another thread of SBIR is called STTR. This still involves a small business, but also involves a research partner. And that research partner could be an academic institution or some other kind of research institution. That institution has additional resources and capabilities that the small business lacks in order to facilitate technology transfer. That's the last point on this slide. So thank you for that. And we can move to the next one. This slide also builds, and here what we're doing is we're talking about the different phases of technical development. Mainly, we are involved in phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, again, is feasibility. Phase 2 is prototyping. And when we get down the line after phase 2 prototyping, we're ready to launch into phase 3 or commercialization. All of the things that we do prior to that with respect to commercialization are planning and are setting the stage for this later launch of actual new products that you've developed in partnership with the federal government. So this is just a small sample. If you could advance this slide through the phase 2 and the phase 3 commercialization information for me. There we go. Thank you. This shows what is needed at each of the stages. So just setting the stage here for you to understand where we're heading when I talk about the different phases. And later on, if you have any specific questions about those, of course, I'm happy to answer them. Let's go to the next slide. So last time I spoke in March, I introduced some funny particular phrases that may seem a bit flippant. I don't intend them that way. Other people who do this work, the same work that I do, have been asking these questions for 20 some odd years. And the questions are, so what and who cares? Well, now, why would we ask a question like that? Well, the program is extremely competitive. Not everyone will win an award. And in order to win an award, you yourself have to be able to answer the questions, so what and who cares about your own innovation? They may be, in fact, the two most crucial questions that you're asked, so you need to know the answers. So what answers the question, why should the government fund your work? And who cares may include the federal agency as a potential customer, or it may include nothing to do with the federal agency, only to do with other customers, but we need to identify them so that the agency knows who you have in mind for your buying customer. And we answer the question again here, who else is interested in your idea? Next slide. Last time we introduced this slide as well, and I'm just going to do a brief highlight on it. This is a little bit of a difference in norms, values, and practices between those who come from a business background and those who come from a scientific background. So on the left, you'll see that in the business column, I highlighted in red certain things that I want you to keep in mind today. Again, if we're in the business realm, we're really focusing deeply on results. Business cares about results and outcomes, not so much simply about methodology. And of course, business, and you know this because you've bought things before from businesses, you've gone to businesses and so on and so forth. The way that businesses think about their success is keeping score via financial performance. So it's all about growing, taking capital in, adding value, and then turning it into a greater amount of capital. Next slide. We have seen before a slide that talked about the winning team to include the principal investigator, who needs to be over 50% employed by the business, directs the project, and is well trained in the topic. And then very likely, and you could go ahead and advance the slide here as I'm speaking, very likely including also a scientific and technical team, but this time we add in some consideration about what we call the partners and strategic advisors. And these people may include research institutions, but they may also include, if you advance the text on this slide, they may include people who are in fact business people. They often include consultants and or business advisors. And these people are crucial to your success. If you know nothing about business, they will help you understand in more detail many of the things that I'm discussing today. Go ahead and advance the slide. So we ask the question, what is commercialization? Well, according to investopedia.com, which is an investor version of Wikipedia, akin to Wikipedia. Commercialization is the process of bringing new products or services to market. The broader act of commercialization entails several business efforts, including production, distribution, marketing and sales, customer support, and all kinds of other key functions that are critical to achieving commercial success of the new product or service. So that's it in a nutshell. It really is talking about finding an audience of buyers for the innovation that you have created. Go on to the next slide. Commercialization potential deeply affects whether or not you're successful in the SBIR STTR program. And there are a few reasons for that. One of the reasons is that agencies favor proposals that offer the best value to the government. Why? Well, because this entire program is funded by ourselves. We are taxpayers. Our taxpayer dollars go to funding many things in the government, including this program. So we all theoretically would want to have the program produce successful products and services that everyone can be using via this investment. Also, this is a pillar of economic development for the nation. So it's a way of maintaining competitiveness in the US on the global stage, and also creating new jobs, which is very crucial for the success of our economy. So we look at things, certainly on the research side, we look at the soundness, technical merit, and define the innovation of the proposed work, but we add in some qualifications of the PI and the team. And now I'm expanding that to include your business consultants or your mentors or your advisors. And then we are sure to answer the question, can your business not only perform the proposed R&D, but also commercialize the results? You are, after all, when you're in this realm, you are a small business. And so that's a very important focus of this program. On the next slide, we'd step back in history just a bit and talk about how did all of this come to be? Because 20 years ago or so, SBIR STTR didn't really have anything to do with commercialization, or it only had to do very, very little with that. Well, historically, startup or early stage business failures were frequent. And when the government, in doing economic development, noticed the prevalence of these types of early stage failures, they said, maybe there's something that we can do about that. Now, these statistics are very old. Remember, I'm talking about history here. So you'll see in the bottom, these were quoted from 1997. But back then, only one of about 3,000 raw ideas ended up being commercially successful. And that is a very dismal success rate, frankly. So many programs came to play. If you'd like to advance to the next slide, many programs came into play to figure out why and how and what do we need to do in order to arrest some of these failures. Some of the early technical efforts were put on really kind of tearing apart all the parts and pieces of how do you create a successful business, and especially one that's based on a technology. So this work is from also several years ago, about 2017. It's from a program along the East Coast. I've just chose it as one of many, but you'll see here that there's a column that has to do with the technical milestones and how the technology is developing, from validating research to creating a plan to establishing the market, et cetera, and then fundamentally proving the concept, operational prototypes, and so on and so forth. And this group mapped this on to business milestones that also need to be conquered in order to literally grow your business. They added as well funding milestones. And as you can see, my point of including this slide is merely to show you the complexity of the levels of things that are going on, both the technical complexity, but also the business and funding complexity that's involved in commercializing innovation. We can go to the next slide. So there were many things that contributed to the failure, many challenges. First of all, we are talking about a realm in which there's a lot of high risk. So we acknowledge that as from the outset and try to figure out how to slowly and methodically remove the risk so that we can move the company forward. We need to assess the viability of the opportunity from a buyer perspective and know who will buy the technology and how do we know they're going to buy that. If we don't even really have a product yet, is there something we can do in the modeling realm or some other place where we figure out how do we know people are going to buy this, this thing that we're envisioning? We also need to find funding, and we are literally advancing the technical development and the business development in parallel. My next slide shows a risk quadrant for these types of technology-based small businesses. So you'll see in the left upper corner, we're talking there about the technical risk. And in SBIR, STTR, phase 1, proof of concept, phase 2, prototyping, those actions that you take to reduce the risk of the technology are funded by those phase 1 and phase 2 programs. But there are several other types of risk, as we've discussed. One is market risk, one is finance risk, or the risk of being able to be funded. And then we also have some risk associated with, do you have the right team members, and are those people going to work out in the way that you think they may to assist you in your small business? Well, some data was collected. And do you remember the slide with the several failures, the many, many failures? Then just after the technical risk, the data showed that the second most damaging type of risk to small businesses was actually market risk, the risk in the shown in the upper right-hand quadrant. And in fact, if we move to the next slide, we see that with market risk analysis, the riskiest type of product to bring on board in any situation by any company is when we have not only a brand new product, but also a brand new market. And more often than not, these things are extremely common with small businesses that are trying to advance technical or innovation products that are innovative. So in order to address this, there was an effort made by several people, and I'll introduce their personas to you shortly, to move away from what has become known as technology push and towards something that's become known as market pull. Historically, when we had all these failures being quite common, people were mainly inventing things in a vacuum. They were at their labs, or they were at their benches, their scientific benches, and they were literally, they had figured out why this thing might be needed, but they were often not really talking to others around them about the details of their product concept. So technology was created, it was invested in through phase 1 and phase 2, it was sort of launched and pushed out into the market. But if there was anything at all that wasn't a good fit with the market about that technology, it often could crash because we didn't know what does the market think about this. We wanted to make a much deeper dive into the problem that we're trying to solve. Oh, by the way, let me ask you to go to the next slide. I apologize. There you go. So I'm talking now from this one, technology push versus market pull. Push happens from a vacuum. It does begin with a description of the invention or the technology. It's often too feature heavy. In other words, has many features, but the customers may or may not value those features. And it's very costly to develop in the absence of information about buyer needs. We've talked about that a moment ago, which is we could put all this money into phase 1 and phase 2, but if we don't know what the buyers need, we might have just taken all that money to no avail. Market pull, on the other hand, wants to know what is the general problem we're trying to solve? What's the urgency of it? In other words, is it a nice to have like a vitamin pill, or is it crucial like a painkiller? Does it solve a critical problem, or is it even more powerful in that it's a game changer and opens new market opportunities? We also look at this in the context of current alternatives. Rather than just looking at it singularly, we look at it as compared to competing ways of solving the problem and ask ourselves, why is this solution so compelling? It will make people and industries literally change. If we go to the next slide, I promised to introduce some characters who were crucial in terms of both inventing some of the concepts I'm going to talk about today, and then also broadening the awareness about them and literally launching them across the country. So there was an effort at Stanford Technology Ventures, and they went to the federal government, asked for some funding, essentially and eventually from the National Science Foundation, to create this new programming. 3 of the people involved were Steve Blank, who is shown on the lower left, Alec Osterwalder, a Swiss gentleman who's a business theorist, and then Eric Rees and Errol Arkulik from UC Berkeley and from NSF. I mention them because they've written several books about the programs that I'm speaking about today. You can, if you wish, take a deeper dive and purchase the books from them. They also have blogs, and you can follow them on Instagram or as you wish. Steve Blank, who led this effort, was a successful serial entrepreneur. In other words, he had started several companies, and he had what he himself calls 2 large craters, which means he dumped a lot of money into something and it didn't turn out to be anything. And then lots of base hits. That's also investor jargon, meaning something was started and it produced some small returns, but not millions or multiple millions of dollars. But then he did, after time, launch a company called Epiphany, which was a huge success. And that's how he became wealthy enough that he could stop working in the way that he did before and literally become a lecturer at Stanford University, and also as a guest lecturer at UC Berkeley, and to teach these other folks about what he was talking about. We refer to these folks because they literally are the grandfathers or the fathers of what I show on the next slide, which is known as the business model canvas. Now, today, I'm not going to talk in detail about the contents of the business model canvas, but what I will say about it is that it's almost like, for those of you who are older and you know what an Etch-a-Sketch is, or for those of you who maybe don't know what an Etch-a-Sketch is, it could be considered like a whiteboard. Businesses, prior to this tool, businesses used to plan their trajectory forward on the business side and about their technology via writing a business plan. A business plan, unfortunately, was a huge amount of effort, written very carefully, and anytime that anything changed at all in the assumptions about the business, it required sort of a rebooting of the plan. Those who work in this realm notice that that seemed to be inefficient and a fair amount of wasted effort. So what they did instead is to invent a single sheet of paper where we can put Post-it notes onto it. And I'm not showing you the Post-it notes here, but we could put Post-it notes up on a wall, or we could use a piece of software that allows us to write and then later on erase some of these key pieces of content in a much faster and quicker way, and then only finally commit the plan to paper once all the unknowns became known. So let's move to the next slide. Essentially, this shows how we move forward in yet another way, from ideation and discovery, which is probably where many of you are right now, to evaluation of your concept, to development of a candidate or an early prototype product, to qualifying customers, and then finally to launch. The reason why I chose this slide is because this is all very research-based. When I talk about it the first time, if you haven't heard of it before, you might wonder, how in the world could this be research-based? But business conducts its own amount of research in academia and otherwise, and there are statistical tools and things that are called quality tools. Historically, that's been what this field has been called: quality improvement, quality management, etc. These tools are used now and applied to innovation in a very successful way. So I'm not going to go through all the tools, but I want you to know that this is based in research methodologies. It's not just something I've made up and I'm telling you. So let's go forward to the next slide. This whole field has become known as lean startup. The motivations for launching this new name, lean startup, and also the concept, was to reduce the failure rate among small businesses, literally to train the next generation of American innovators and entrepreneurs, of course, to strengthen the U.S. capabilities to lead in technical innovation, and to stimulate the nation's economy, as well as, of course, for those of us who are business people or want to be business people, to increase our capital or make money. Now, I'm going to talk next on the next slide about a little bit about a business model. And in order to do that, you remember 2 slides ago, it was called the business model canvas. Well, a business model essentially tells us how any one type of business, what is the model that will be revenue producing about that business. Revenue in business is sort of like gasoline for your automobile. Without it, you can't go anywhere. You need to have money in order to create value and make more money. Money is a commodity. It has timing and value. It can be sourced either by debt or equity or grants. And it is a commodity that that the goal of creating this entire group of folks working together in one direction is to align with the align investor interests and customer interests. Because if we can do that, then we've removed the market risk that I spoke about a few slides back. A successful business will have a sound revenue model. They'll have realistic revenue forecasts. They'll have sufficient estimated profit margins, and they want to be able to also make sure that they have cash available as it's needed, or cash flow from an accounting perspective. This is something we cannot ignore when we think about creating a business around innovation. Let's move on to the next slide. Well, why should you care? Why else should you care? First of all, I have seen over the 20 some odd years that I've been working in this realm, the enormous amounts of time and effort, and even their own money that entrepreneurs put into these technology-based businesses. If you would like to help yourself succeed, you need to care about the commercial aspects of things as well as about the technical aspect. So we together want to know who will want to buy your product or proposed product or service. what are the details of the problem that they're trying to solve? And does your solution actually meet a market need? Or is it something that's sort of nice to have, but isn't really going to attract any buyers? The problems that you define must be problems for potential buyers, and the solution must very clearly focus on addressing that or those problems. And then the value provided, which we refer to as the value propositions, emerge or rest in solving that or those problems for specific identified buyers. Let's move on to the next slide. So, what is a business model? Well, a business model is literally the collective way a company intends to make money. It's the sum total of all the strategies, the business approaches, and their interrelationships to other parts of the business and the external world. In existing firms that are already launched and have revenue, have launched products, etc., the business model is firmly entrenched, and all of the employees are executing their roles within that known model. However, it's very different in small business, especially in startups, where in a nascent small business, the business model is literally yet to be identified. We don't know what the business model will be. We might have some excellent hunches, some really on-target ideas, but we need to validate that with data to make sure that we're correct about it. And a method called customer discovery helps us elicit the business model. Next slide. So, what is customer discovery? Well, Steve Blank, the gentleman I referred to a few slides back, is prone to say that customer discovery involves getting out of the building. In other words, getting away from your bench, getting out of your lab, etc., and talking to prospective buyers or clients to literally understand their pain from their perspective, and then allowing us to define our buyer personas and then test for a match with your solution to their problem. We call that product market fit. So we're testing literally like it's a hypothesis. We're testing for product market fit, and we'll either be proven correct in our hypotheses or we'll be proven, oh, that's not quite right. We need to think of another starting point. Techniques, as I mentioned before, the various tools, techniques from something that's nowadays called design thinking are used, and this is very much like validating scientific hypotheses. I have found over and over again in 20 some odd years of doing this, that I still learn things that cannot be learned any other way than doing customer discovery. It's that powerful. You can learn things from reading on the internet and from looking at market research reports, etc., but there's really no substitute for getting out and talking to people and finding out what they really think. There are some specific techniques for that. We're not going to cover those today. We want you to first understand what I'm talking about before we move forward. So let's go to the next slide. Customers always want to know what's in it for them. They want to have not just the features of your product, they want to have benefits in certain ways. Either their pains or their annoyances or their problems need to be alleviated, their desires satisfied. That's what they care about, and that's what moves them to open up their wallet and pay for something that you might produce. And we think about this again in the context of figuring out what is the competitive advantage of your particular product or service. Next slide, please. So where do we begin? Well, one place is to brainstorm in the beginning who might be your customers. Who do you think might directly purchase whatever value you're creating? Sometimes that's actually the end user of your product, but it may be another party. Maybe if your end user is a patient, for example, you have a life sciences technology and the end user is a patient, your buyer might actually be a healthcare system, not the patient themselves. And that's because of the complexity we have in the realm with payers and insurance and so on and so forth. We also want to know who are the most influential customers, or who influences the whole idea about your product being brought to market. Are there intermediaries? Is it a multi-sided market, such as, again, the thing that I just mentioned a moment ago, payers, CMS in pharma, et cetera? And we want to also know what other stakeholders must be considered. If we start there, brainstorming a list of each of these types of folks, we can begin to tease out who we should talk to, and also begin to think about, are there different, distinct ways in which these different segments benefit from your technology? Let's go to the next slide. What we're trying to do is essentially identify value propositions. In other words, answering the question, what value is being provided? So if we, again, can identify properly the customer need that's being satisfied and the value that's being delivered to the buying customer, and we know what customer problem is being solved, we can also ask ourselves, are we able to create or develop what's called the whole product? Are we delivering an entire thing that the end user can use without any augmentation, supplementation, any other tools or needs? Then we know that we have the whole product. Sometimes, though, in the realm of technical innovation, what you may invent might not be a standalone solution. It may be part of something that's larger that needs another a piece or kit or some other kind of off-the-shelf product to augment it in order to really meet the full needs of the customer. That's important to know as well, because then you'll be able to figure out, do you need partners in order to have your business be a success? Some of the example things that we look at for product or service characteristics, or sometimes I often call them attributes, are things like sensitivity and specificity, accuracy, cost, efficiency. Is it user-friendly? Sometimes we ask about the mechanism of action, but not always. There's a very long list of things that might be considered attributes. And what we do is have you or help you think through which of those are important in order to bring your product forward. Let's go to the next slide. This slide characterizes these things as features versus benefits. You might remember a few slides ago, I talked about some technologies being feature heavy. It's fine that that be the case, but we want to understand not only the features of a design, which might be, if we were talking about an umbrella, it might be that the umbrella is unbreakable, it might be made of waterproof material, and it might have a very fancy real wood handle. But what are the benefits? The customers, these features are sort of interchangeable in a way, because essentially, if we think about this from the point of view of the customer, really the customer either wants to be kept dry from the rain or maybe protected from harmful sun rays. I've given some more technical examples below that little graphic about what features are versus what benefits are. Again, features, we're talking about specificity, binding properties, etc. But benefits are, do they help someone increase their effectiveness? Do they reduce cost in some way? Are they providing an easier or more simple treatment regime? And so on and so forth. So again, just throwing out some thoughts to get your brain thinking about, in your particular case, with the type of business that you have, what are the benefits that you might be providing? Now let's loop back, before we go to the Q&A, let's loop back on the next slide to the specifics that are required by the different funding agencies. And here I took a couple of examples only. I could have made 11 examples because there's 11 different agencies that fund these programs. But that would have been an enormous amount of slides. And here I'm just trying to give you a sense of how they might be similar and how they might vary. So I chose, for example, NSF, because again, they were deeply involved in the very genesis of business model canvas and lean startup and so on and so forth. So of all the agencies, they have, I think, the most detailed requirements about commercialization that need to be addressed and spoken about in phase 1 of their technical awards. Here, I'm giving you some direction. That's why I have the word phase 1 sort of directionally, because you don't have to execute on these things during phase 1. In fact, you're not permitted to do that, but you need to have thought about them and planned for them, and or be thinking about them and planning for them as your phase 1 award is being conducted. So with NSF, directionally, we're talking about knowing before we propose a phase 1 proposal, the potential for a technology to disrupt a targeted market segment by way of what they call a strong and durable value proposition for customers and users. They also want to fund products that address unmet, important, and scalable needs for a target customer base. I've put some of these words in, highlighted them in red for you so that they stand out a bit more. They also want that the proposed small business be structured and staffed to be able to focus on aggressive commercialization when the time comes. That, again, doesn't mean in phase 1, but it means that starting early, you may have some business advisors, or you may have some consultants who help you think about the business aspects of your technology. And lastly, they want the applicant to provide evidence of good product market fit. We talked about that a moment ago, literally validated by direct and significant interaction with potential customers and related stakeholders. So they're requiring us to get out of the building and talk to potential buyers. Now, NIH, on the other hand, because of the complexity of the regulatory aspects in most of their technologies, they don't expect as much during phase 2. So on the right hand, I've got a column that says, okay, what does NIH care about during phase 2? And in phase 2, you have to produce an entire commercialization plan. And this list of things here are all the required elements that they want you to speak to. You'll produce 12 pages of documentation about the value of your project, the expected outcomes, the impact on not only technology, but on commercialization. They want to know deeply about the company, its background, the resources it has, and so on. They want to know a very nice presentation about the market, the customer, and the competition. Of course, they want to know about your IP. They want to know about your finance plan. What will you do after getting government money in phase 2 so that you can carry on and actually launch a product? They want to know about your production and marketing plan for your technology and how you will produce a revenue stream. So again, I'm using a lot of different terms here because I'm forced to use the terms that NSF uses. I'm forced to use the terms that NIH uses, but hopefully by giving you some basic definitions of some of these earlier things, you start to understand, revenue equals monetization equals how your business model is going to operate. Let's move on to the next slide. We're getting close to an hour. And I am happy to stay on for up to 30 minutes additional in order to answer your questions. If you find that you don't have time to stay on today with us, with the group, know that this webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to have that sent to you by filling out the survey if you have to drop off. And that part will include the Q&A as well. So when we look at this slide here, this is also a build slide. If you just want to click through it, please, why don't you click through all of the different parts for me, since we had a little problem with our sharing screen today. The proposal preparation includes, and this is a review slide from last time around, but I've highlighted certain things here again. The agency wants to know, do you have a compelling story? On the left side, there's an important problem, and there certainly is a viable commercial opportunity. And then on the right side, when you address your significance, who is this important to? What is the product? And who is the target customer? These are the elements we've seen before in terms of creating your story, but I've highlighted in red the specifics that have to do more with commercialization than with the technology. I'm coming to the very end of my presentation here. The next slide talks about reasons to pursue SBIR, STTR funding. So if you want to click through that, certainly we want to develop new products or services for commercial sale. Some of you may want to establish having the government as your customer. In other words, being perhaps a sole source marketing position with certain agencies to buy your product if you have are able to launch that. And no matter what, the process is worth it for the strategies that you develop, the planning you do, and the people and partners that you meet. My almost last slide is what evidence can you gather? There are a couple of ways to conduct market research. One is, and this is counterintuitive, I'm afraid, by definition, secondary market research is research that comes from the literature, such as market research reports and so on and so forth. The term secondary means you did not do the market research yourself. You went to a secondary source and got it from them. Or you can do this primary market research, which is you going out and learning how to do customer discovery, conducting that. And that is what we're introducing here today, is this idea that you yourself will get involved in customer discovery. In any event, the evidence that you provide the agency are known as letters of support, and they literally provide evidence that others care. So one thing that we want to do quite early on is not only think about how to advance our technology, but think about who do we know that's interested in the work that you're doing and might be willing to write a letter for your submission. It would be ideal if they were a future potential buyer of your product or service, or and mostly depending on the agency, a follow-on investor. So moving to the next slide, we want to have offer ourselves up to help you get started. Federal funding is available and highly competitive. Planning invested can reap you so many different rewards, and these techniques for success can be learned. So we are here to help. With that, I'm going to turn it back to our host, Uxma, and I'll be available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was a lot of information for our audience. So I'm sure, and I hope that our audience got, learned a lot from that. And if anything, thank you for mentioning also, as we mentioned in the chat again, that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website. And I just want to show our audience, just in case they're new, that this website is what we're talking about. This is our library where all the recorded on-demand webinars are stored, and you just keep scrolling and scrolling, and you can load more here, and you'll see all of our previous webinars there. And the webinar that Cheryl mentioned doing in March is this one. So choosing the right agency and starting your pitch. And this is the second one, and there will also be a third, I believe. All right, so let's go to our Q&A. We have had 3 questions so far too. Wasia says, thanks for the talk. And our audience, please know that, if you would like similar webinars like this, if you have feedback, please complete our surveys and let us know what we can cover for you. All right, so we have another Cheryl Fitzer Addis. Cheryl asks, you have emphasized the US government as key potential customer, as well as importance of US taxpayers for these grants. Our company is based in the US, but the product/service is being developed for global usage. Additionally, some consultants are not US based. Are these things problematic for SBIR funding, or will such applications be deprioritized?
Thank you, Cheryl. That's an excellent question. It's been my experience that global usage is wonderful. It is harder, of course, to conquer the globe without picking a country to lead off or launch your product in. And at this point, without knowing your product and your project, it's not evident to me whether that's going to be launched first in the US or not. One key thing you want to be aware of is that in phase one, at least, if you're going for a phase one funding, all of the work that you propose to be performed must be done within the US. However, having consultants that are not US based is fine, and that should not create any difficulties for you. In fact, it may even be helpful if you are launching in a country outside the US. So it's fine to have your firm here, to create the product here, do the development here, and then launch it globally from here. That's perfectly fine. That may, in fact, mean that you have a larger market. So have I answered your question entirely? If not, pop back in the chat and you can ask me whatever it is that you'd like me to follow on with.
Sure, perfect. We have a question from Wazia, and they ask, hi, Dr. Wazia here from LiveStem MedTech, New Jersey. We have developed market fit products/medical devices in India under a different startup and would like to apply for funding for FDA clearance and approvals. Which agency can I apply to?
Yeah, so thank you, Wazia. It's a little hard for me to tell exactly from your question how to direct you, because it sounds like you have something at least partially developed. You say you've assured the product market fit. It sounds like it's a firm that's maybe headquartered in India, but yet you want to launch it in the US. I wonder, you might be able to do something like create a subsidiary here, or create a brand new LLC here that then licenses that technology from the parent company. That could be a possibility, because if you want to apply, and I'm sort of stressing, oh, you created LiveStem here. Okay, thank you for that. So LiveStem, if it is here and is licensed something from another country, it is possible, as long as the work that you propose is done inside the US, you may still be able to apply. It's unclear how far along the development path you are based on your question. So if you already have the product entirely developed, SBIR STTR may not be for you. If you're seeking only funding to get the regulatory aspects taken care of and you have a full product development otherwise, you may be beyond where phase one and phase two SBIR STTR would come in. You could see one of us privately about that, and we could help you perhaps with more details.
Yep, perfect. And just a reminder to everyone, our audience, that we do have our tech team. So our NJSBDC Tech team is available, like Cheryl mentioned. If you go to our code here that is on the screen, the QR code, you can, if you scan this with your phone, it will take you directly to our counseling registration page. And if you are going directly from this webinar, I highly recommend that you, in the assistance box that it will ask for, you let them know, you let our organization know why you're requesting counseling. So you can say something like, oh, I attended SBIR STTR webinar with Cheryl Vickroy. I would like to speak with her or our tech team. Please assist, and someone will definitely assign you to the right person within the tech team. So please reach out, definitely recommended. And Cheryl, as a follow-on, says, thanks for the response. There may be some difficulties launching first in the US, hence the global focus for initial launch.
Sure. And again, there's no problem with launching worldwide, no problem whatsoever.
Perfect. Then we have a question from Myung. And they ask, hello, we have a waste to energy technology in the IP application stage. Would we still qualify for phase 1?
Okay, thank you, Myung. It sounds like from the little bit that I see here in the question, I would say it's very likely. What I understand by what you're saying, IP application stage, I think you mean you're applying for either a preliminary patent or a patent. People often do that before they do apply for phase 1 funding. Okay, patent, thank you for that. So that often comes first and is valued by the agencies in terms of evaluating your technology. So that's a wonderful first step. And then again, beyond that, you would definitely qualify for phase 1, which is to advance, because let me expand a little bit more on that. The patent may not mean necessarily that you have developed a prototype or even something beyond a theoretical model. Patents can often be filed based on concepts and don't need to have a product behind them yet. So if that's where you are right now, you would definitely qualify for phase 1 and phase 2 funding.
Got it. Okay. Myung, hopefully that answers your question. But again, as you can see from Cheryl's answers, a lot of this is very detail oriented. So, we do definitely need a lot of detail to answer the question. So it's kind of like a depends on the situation type of answer. So, and our tech team is more than happy to answer your questions, even if it's for, just an initial counseling session. All right. Yeah. We have from Jonathan. Jonathan says, I am developing an educational tool for K-12. I am in the early stages of writing the software platform. Is SBIR a potential path for funding of the development?
Yes, very much so. There are more than one agency interested in educational tools. It probably seems obvious that the Department of Education likes those types of tools. However, the National Science Foundation also funds development of educational tools, and they have more frequent deadlines around the year, and thusly, because we just came through a period where the Department of Education had a deadline last February. And here we're sitting in April. It's going to be a while before that one comes open again, but NSF will have deadlines in June. And I think October, without checking. They just recently changed their cycle. So maybe October. And then again, Department of Ed in February. So I would say check with one of us and we can help you assess where you might apply. Definitely, that's very fundable.
All right, so that I think concludes our Q&A session. I don't think we have anything more coming in. Let me just double check. Nope, so we are good with our Q&A session. For the survey link and for the webinar link, that has been shared in the chat, but our webinar assistant will be sharing them again. Gloria, if you would please. And just to let you all know what is coming up for next week, for Thursday, May 4th. We are already in May next week. April has ended. Please scan that QR code and that will directly lead you to our Eventbrite page. April 30th, like I mentioned earlier, it's the start of our Small Business Week. So we will be having our National Small Business Week special start off. So essential small business resources explained by the SBA. So we have our NJ District Director, John Blackstock, coming in, and he will be explaining, what the resources that are available to our small business community here in New Jersey. I'm excited for that. I hope you all can join me again, since this is, a new information available to everyone. So please join, come support us. And if you are interested in more webinars from Cheryl, please let us know in the survey. We're more than happy to do more of these. And Cheryl, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this webinar with us. We highly appreciate it.
Great. And I look forward to seeing everyone again in the future. Thank you so much.
All right. So just a reminder, we've helped 15,000 plus small businesses grow. We hit our 45th anniversary just last year. So, we know what we're doing. We have no cost small business consulting, training and events starting at $0, exclusive small business resources. Again, point your camera there or go to njsbdc.com and hope to see you next Thursday. All right. Have a good day. Bye.